Welcome all into the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I'm Zach Farmer. We are on the eve of the Sweet 16. We are on the eve of Gonzaga and Purdue for the right to go to the Elite Eight. And I'm really happy to bring in Connor Hope of the Heat Check College Basketball podcast. You can follow Connor on basketball at Hoops Hope CBB. Connor, it's great to talk with you. I know you got back from overseas just a little while ago. How you been doing? And I'm sure you're excited for Zags and Boilermakers this Friday.
Yeah, no, finally overcame the jet lag. It is as you know, a split household in the Hope family, I guess, not in my house, but in the Hope family. My brother, a Purdue grad, myself, a Gonzaga grad. All looking up. My mom is a UConn grad, so she doesn't even partake in the pseudo rivalry that we've got going on, Purdue versus Gonzaga. But it's I'm at peace with this season for the Zags. So whatever happens on Friday, I'm fine with it. But obviously, you would love the Zags to take out Purdue, go to the Elite Eight. I think if they can get past Purdue, there's a very not unrealistic path to a national championship game appearance. Purdue's the biggest hurdle. So I'm at peace with where the Zags are. But if they can get past this game, I think the adrenaline in my system about Gonzaga basketball will start to turn again.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it kind of like a couple different times throughout the season. I mean, this Gonzaga team was on the bubble no less than a month and a half ago before they picked up that win against Kentucky. They didn't have that quad one victory. They looked kind of out of sorts a bit early on, but they found themselves. They have reached a Sweet 16 for the 9th straight time. It kind of like, as it's all said and done, this team is right back to kind of where they normally are. And as you kind of like think about the path to get here, what's maybe something that just stands out about this group that maybe is different or unique that you've kind of noticed than some of the other Zag teams of the past?
I think first and foremost, it was sussing out roles for this team. Most of the Zag teams in the past, you had 4 guys coming back from the previous year. Roles expanded and changed, but you kind of knew what the roles were going to be. This year coming in, you had a sense, Ryan Nembhard's primary point guard. Nolan Hickman's going to be the off-ball guard, but he can also play a little bit of the point. Until 2 days before the season, you're like, okay, Steele Venters is going to be the floor stretcher. Anton Watson, you thought was going to explode as the primary option. Graham Ike, you were certain he was going to have a big role. We're unsure how it was going to happen with him coming off that leg injury that sidelined him at Wyoming. And then over the course of the season, it was like a give and take. It wasn't so much every player on the team, because we've had that issue for Gonzaga in the past where every player on the team thinks they're the guy. This wasn't that team. They almost deferred to each other. Like, they trusted each other too much. Nobody wanted to take over. Dusty Stromer was put into a role early on that he was not ready for. That wasn't the role that he was expecting as the season began. Mark Few made a perfect decision to go big, bring Ben Gregg in, play Anton Watson as a big 3. And then you started to see it. Ryan Nembhard doesn't have to be a scorer. He can be a floor general. He can get 11 to 12 assists a game and 7 points. And that's a great game for Ryan Nembhard. Nolan Hickman has, I think, taken on less of the point guard responsibilities over the last couple of weeks and more of just I'm going to be the guy who scores from the perimeter. He shoots at a really high clip. Ben Gregg, I think he's the toughest player on this team. He does whatever's asked of him, stretches the floor as a 4, gets the offensive rebounds, the putbacks, finishes through contact. Anton Watson, still one of the best defenders in the country, but certainly the best defender on this team. And then Graham Ike just took over.
Yeah.
And it seems like every Gonzaga team you want to see them play through their perimeter. You want to see them play through their wings. And Mark Few, I've said it. Mark Few is the best developer of big men, at least a top 3 developer of big men in the country. And no disrespect to Cal or Bill Self or Coach K, but they got big men who were already league ready. No disrespect to Matt Painter, but he's dealing with a different subset of big man than Mark Few is. But it seems like every big that comes through Gonzaga, whether it be Graham Ike, whether it be Philip Petrushev, whether it be Shemek Karnowski, they all come in. They all have to get their bearings. But even though, yes, Graham Ike came in at a different level than Philip Petrushev and Shemek Karnowski, you've still seen him grow into a role that, he was good at Wyoming in the role he had there. He was dominant down the stretch for Gonzaga in the role that they gave him. So as long as he's on the floor, this Gonzaga team, I think, is a well-oiled machine. They play for each other. They play together. They take on the roles that they are given. You see that with the 2 bench freshmen. They come in and play the roles that they're given, and it works. And earlier on in the season, that wasn't the case. I think earlier on in the season, their players didn't know what their role was, and they needed to grow and learn that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, again, like we talk about, like the difference between this team, what we saw in November, and what we see today. This game on Friday is going to be a very kind of clear indicator of that, because they're playing a team they saw way back in November in Purdue. And this Gonzaga team is different. This Purdue team is a different team than what we saw even at the beginning of the year. They were still figuring a few things out, albeit Zach Edey is still the center of that universe. But as we've kind of gone in through the first couple games of the tournament, I mean, in a very favorable pod, and they ended up blowing out McNeese, even though everybody was picking McNeese. That was a 12-5 favorite of a lot of people. Took care in resounding fashion, even a shorthanded Kansas team, but still a very good Kansas team, even without having Kevin McCullers out there. This Gonzaga team, as they've started to kind of pick up steam, it always seems like that, almost per the usual, they find a way to use some of the outside noise to fuel them. And I think I think Mark, you even actually mentioned that they were kind of using some of that 12-5 upset chatter to their advantage, and using that as the actual bulletin board material. And as you kind of watch them in the tournament, like what's been your impressions of them in these albeit two blowout wins in a pod that kind of favored them, but what was, like, as you kind of looked at it all, how are you feeling about this team?
I feel really good. The one thing that Gonzaga's had struggles with, well, I don't even say it was consistently struggled, and that's consistently why they lost, but Ryan Nembhard getting out over his skis a little bit on the offensive end has led to some struggles early in the Pacific game, in the title game against St. Mary's. When the opponent is controlling the pace and really doing their part to slow Gonzaga down, Ryan Nembhard tended to start pushing the issue. And I think what you've seen in this tournament, well, first of all, Gonzaga's controlled the pace, so it hasn't been an issue, but you've seen the best of Ryan Nembhard as a floor general in these 2 games. You've seen Nembhard and Hickman say and tell their opponents, especially when they were playing McNeese, if you're not going to respect us, we're going to kill you from the 3-point line. Mm-hmm. And you saw that defenders for McNeese were going under every screen on Ryan Nembhard to try and double Graham Ike and prevent him from getting an easy look at the rim. And Ryan Nembhard had a couple of those just wide open deep threes that he took and made because his opponent wasn't respecting him. And you saw the same thing from Hickman. I think you saw the same thing from Dusty Stromer too.
Yeah.
I think one of the issues, and it's not that simple because coaches watch all the film, But earlier on in the season, Gonzaga was not shooting the ball well.
Yeah.
Gonzaga is a top 50 3-point shooting team in the country. They shoot over 36% from three. Like they are a good 3-point shooting team with Nolan Hickman, who shoots at a really high clip, over 40%. Ben Gregg shoots over 38%. Dusty Stromer is at about 36, 37. So they have really good 3-point shooters on this team. You have to respect Anton Watson, who's shooting 40% from three. And every player on this team, if you give them the space, they're going to take advantage of it. And that's not something they were able to do earlier on in the year.
Now again, like thinking about that sort of game that hasn't really, they've been so efficient inside the paint and inside that 3-point line, where that has kind of been how they crawled back into the season and kind of crawled and started to have a lot of success. I think what was like kind of like even some of the examples, I think they shoot like 70+% inside the arc or inside the paint and a lot of opportunities. They are so efficient inside that sometimes you do forget that they are still, they for the course of the season have been efficient on the offensive end. But when they did see Purdue back in November, they took 30+ threes, which was definitely even for a Gonzaga team of the past, that's a lot of threes in a single game. It seemed like that there was a little bit of a, not necessarily a fear, but a game plan of we can't get inside on Edey, so we have no choice but to be pushed further and further out. And I don't expect that to be the case this time around. I do think that they're going to try to push the issue a little bit more into the paint, and especially now that they can use the three bigs they figured out how to use the three bigs at the same time. As you're reading like now against Purdue, this Gonzaga team as they play today, it does feel like that they're going to be able to maybe not necessarily take advantage, quote unquote, of Zach Edey, but like that they're going to force the issue inside a little bit more than maybe they did when they saw them back in November.
Yeah, I think what you've seen with Zach Edey is, first of all, anyone who says Gonzaga is just going to slice and dice him with the pick and roll hasn't watched Zach Edey play defense, because he is one of the best bigs in drop coverage, and he does not go up to the top of the pick and roll. So like you're not beating him with your guard. He's going to drop back and take your big back. He's really forcing you and daring you to shoot it on the pick and roll. I think what they're going to have to try and do, which is what a lot of teams have tried to do and have struggled with, is really almost use the basket to their advantage. A lot of times I've seen Zach Edey, if he's caught out of position on the opposite side of a basket from a player driving to the rim, he's not going to try and block that shot unless it's like a close game and he needs to make a play. But if it's just in the normal course of a game, he wants to preserve fouls. And knowing how big he is, knowing how all the eyeballs are on him, he's not going to make a decision to try and block a shot when he's out of position on the other side of the paint. And with the ability that we've seen from Ben Gregg and Anton Watson to really cut to the rim as bigs, like I think there could be a little bit of action there that Gonzaga can use, where they use EK to kind of lure or a guard to kind of lure Zach Edey to the opposite side of the basket, and then kind of backdoor cut or something like that with Anton Watson to try and get some easy looks at the rim. But other than that, I think Gonzaga is going to have to score from the perimeter, maybe not shooting 33s, but Purdue's more vulnerable on their perimeter defense than they are on the interior. That's just a fact. That is what you get when you have a 7-foot dominant center like they have in Zach Edey. Teams shoot a moderate amount of threes against them, but they make them, at a better clip than they make twos. And I know you look at the percentages, like 31 to 45 or whatever it is, but like 31 is if you're making 30% of your threes against Purdue, you're happy with it. If you're making 45% of your twos against any team, you're not. So I think Gonzaga's they're going to have to try and get easy looks at the rim. but probably beat Purdue from the perimeter.
And so, the last time these two met, again, like it's hard. You don't want to like read too much into that first matchup. But one of the things that was clearly different the first time was that Graham Ike did not know that role, what he was supposed to kind of like, where he fit and how and as we've seen him be way more assertive and become that kind of 1A type player for this team. With him more or less probably picking up the Zach Edey assignment likely in this game, or at least some combination of he and Watson and Ben Gregg. Like, is he going to have to try to pull out a little bit more onto the wing or the perimeter? Because if he tries to post, it feels like to me like he can't go straight post up against Edey because he's just going to get stuffed.
Probably a little bit. They're probably not going to do the Graham Ike, give him a post touch and let him go to work with it.
Yeah.
That's not going to work. They'll have to do a little bit more, screen game with Ike. Maybe try and get him switched onto like a Trey Kaufman-Renn or a Mason Gillis, where he can take a little bit more advantage of that. Because like I think, when you're looking at the front line of Gonzaga, whether Edey's on Ike or Gregg or Watson, like you're shutting one of Gonzaga's better offensive weapons down. So it's going to be interesting. Mark Few comes in. He had a set concept that worked against Kentucky. He had a set concept that worked against Kansas. I think the reason why you see him have to switch things up a little bit more against St. Mary's is because Randy Bennett just knows him so well that whenever he comes up with something that might work, Randy Bennett has the perfect counter for it. But this is a game that's going to be won by Gonzaga. If it's won by Gonzaga, it's going to be won on the offensive end. And so it's really, Gonzaga has to find something that works and force Matt Painter to make adjustments.
And one of the matchups I think is just going to be really fun to watch in this one is Nembhard and Braden Smith. Like these two going back and forth is going to be really fun. We know Braden Smith got banged up in the Big Ten tournament, so he was kind of still like working his way back after that. But a few weeks kind of removed from what was it? I think he pulled like this quad or something like that in the Big Ten tournament. But this is feels like it's going to be one of the more fun things to kind of watch as those two go back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, both of them are, we don't have to score past, I don't even call them pass first point guards, but just smart play point guards. And so you're right. It's going to be really fun to watch. I'm really excited to see what both sides of the ball do with Fletcher Loyer. Because defensively, I think you're going to have to put a big on Loyer, because you're not going to put like Lance Jones. I think Nolan Hickman gets the Lance Jones assignment, at least until Gonzaga switches. Same with Nembhard and Smith, but someone's going to have to check Fletcher Loyer at the start of every possession. And it's probably Ben Gregg, but it might be Watson. So it'll be interesting. But on the same side, on the other end of the floor, like if Fletcher Loyer's, getting the, can beat either of those guys off the dribble, although I don't know if he could beat Anton Watson off the dribble. On the other end of the floor, he's going to have to defend one of them. So that's going to be maybe not exciting, but that's going to be a little bit of like that nuanced, who wins that matchup might win the game type of thing, because it is 3 guards and 2 bigs against 3 bigs and 2 guards. So you're going to have a guard and a big at all times matched up on each other.
And you and I were talking before we started recording that, I mean, I had Gonzaga to this point in the Sweet 16, seeing exactly where they are, but I have the road ending against Purdue. Is that kind of what you initially had, or what's your read on how this is going to go on Friday?
Yeah. So I had Gonzaga. I have Purdue winning the national championship. I had Gonzaga out in the Sweet 16. After the game against Kansas, I started feeling Iffy's a weird word when you're a Gonzaga fan picking Gonzaga to lose, but I started feeling iffy about my pick of Gonzaga losing. And then Purdue came out and went up against a Utah State team that I thought was pretty good and said, no, we're not even going to entertain losing this game. And I feel better about that pick now because I think Purdue, if they're not playing like the best team in the country, they're playing like the second best team in the country. They have the best big in the country. They have the best 3-point shooting team in the country. Like I said, the only thing that you could argue is a little bit iffy is sometimes their defense has lapses. And they're still a top 15 defense in the country, but they don't force a lot of turnovers. So if teams can get their shots up and they start making their shots, and Gonzaga's been making their threes at a 48 something percent clip in this tournament, you have a shot. But other than that, I just think this team is, I mean, you talk about how deep this team goes. Zach Edey got subbed out with 12 minutes left in the game against Utah State. Braden Smith with 9.5. Fletcher Lawyer with like 7 something. I think Lance Jones was out by the 6-minute mark. All the way down to like Cam Heidi didn't play the last 3.5, 4 minutes of that game. And Purdue scored 57 second half points with just 2 each from Braden Smith and Zach Edey. It's a deep team. If you had to pick 2 coaches that put together the best offensive sets in the country, and put together the best offenses in the country, it'd be hard to find 2 better than Mark Few and Matt Painter. So I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I said it on the Sleepers Media preview with Greg and Carter. I think it's going to be probably in the 85 to 76 range, maybe a little bit more high-scoring than that. But at the end of the day, I think it's probably going to come down to Purdue is up by 2 possessions the entirety of the second half, and then probably pulls away a little bit more at the end of the game with free throws.
All right. Well, this wasn't the only Gonzaga news over the course of the last few days. The transfer portal has already been very active, and Gonzaga has already pulled in a familiar name to the WCC fans. Michael Ajayi, the transfer wing from Pepperdine, just moves up the coast. He heads back to his home state of Washington to play for the Zags. And just initially, just looking at this, obviously it has a lot of Zag Nation excited to be bringing someone that they're familiar with in, and someone who's kind of like seems like he's going to fit a need for a team that kind of has been missing something more consistently at the 3.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to get too ahead of yourselves, but watching him this year and watching Gonzaga the past couple of years, the one thing that they've always kind of missed is that athletic wing who could play big or small, shoot the ball, rebound well, defend well, has the length. I've heard him likened to, and probably accurately, but maybe a little bit exaggerated, likened to like a cross between a Rui and a Julian Strother, in that like he's a really good catch and shoot, 98th percentile in the country in terms of effective field goal percentage on catch and shoot opportunities. But he does have the length and the size and the athleticism and the strength to be a little bit more versatile in the way that Rui Hachimura was for Gonzaga during that season where they made the Elite 8. So it's going to be, I think, fun to watch, because obviously you expect him to take the Anton Watson role, but he's much more versatile than Anton Watson. And defensively, he's probably not as tough as Anton Watson, but we have also only ever seen him in a Lorenzo Romar defense.
Right.
So there's opportunities there, I think, for Mark Few to coach him up defensively and put together a team that, assuming nobody leaves, or at least none of the 6 rotation players that have eligibility left leave, like this is a team that you could see opening up certainly as a top 10 team next year, but even up as high as maybe like a 5 or 6 in the country.
Right, because you're looking at a starting five at least of a Ryan Nebhard, Nolan Hickman, probably Michael Ajayi, and Ben Gregg, and Graham Ike as that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and with Dusty Stromer, and now Steele Venters coming off the bench for this squad. So yeah, this Gonzaga team, as currently constructed, obviously there's still portaling that may happen, but we'll see. But yeah, it really does seem like that they found a perfect piece, and it happened so fast. Like he announced that he was hitting the portal, and then I think even while I was in Spokane, the announcement comes like, "Oh, he's going on a Gonzaga visit." 2 days later, he announces it on social media that he's heading to the Pacific Northwest. So it all happened pretty quickly.
Yeah, it certainly really quickly. It probably, I mean, you knew like he was leaving because Romar was leaving,
Yep.
and maybe a little bit because of the way the season went. Um, and I think for him, it's just the way he plays. You want to go into a pro style offense, and who on the West Coast runs the best pro style offenses? It's Gonzaga or it's Arizona.
Yep.
And certainly Arizona's not in the state of Washington. Arizona's not or might not be losing their three. I think they lose Kashad Johnson this year, but I think Ajayi wants to move more into that. Seems like he is a bit better fit for that 3-4 role rather than you played the 4 and a little bit of the 5 for Pepperdine this year. But yeah, it's surround Graham Ike with shooters is what this roster looks like. Because even Braden Huff can shoot the ball a little bit, obviously. Steele Venters shot the ball really well when he was at Eastern Washington. Dusty Stromer's shot has improved tremendously. Ryan Nemhard, for as low as his percentage is, I think he's a better shooter than his percentage shows. Nolan Hickman, we mentioned his 3-point percentage. Ajayi doesn't shoot a ton of threes, but when he does, it's like a 46-47% clip. So like this is a team where if Purdue can do it, and obviously EK's not Zach Edey, but Purdue found success surrounding a really good big with a ton of shooters. And I think that this is what you kind of see with this Gonzaga team as well. They can go big, they can go small, they can shoot, they can play inside. They're probably going to be just as good defensively, maybe even more so, because I feel like their defense has gotten better over the last 3 weeks. And maybe they found the recipe there, but we'll see. There's still plenty of time for Gonzaga to maybe make another acquisition, which could push them even higher in the preseason rankings.
Gonzaga in a down year reaches the Sweet 16, and it looks like they're going to end up, even at least on paper, in a better position next year than they were this year. Connor, thanks for hopping on. It's always great to chat with you. Gonzaga will be taking on Purdue in the Sweet 16 on Friday. I believe it's are they the 4:00 game or the 7:00 game? Can't remember which one.
I think they're the second game. They're 7:39 Eastern, so 4:30
Oh,
Pacific.
so they're the first game of the West Coast calendar.
Yes.
In their region in Detroit. So once again, thanks for hopping on. It's always great to chat with you. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, and like on social media, follow on social media. Connor, great having you, and we'll definitely catch up next time.
Yeah, always good to come on and talk Gonzaga hoops, but hopefully there's better news for St. Mary's coming down the road.
One can only hope.